Lovran at the moment, and Medveya is about 10 minutes, 15 minutes walk along from Lovran. So, I think it's about 13 probably, 13 or 14 or something like that. But I always enjoy my first dip in the sea when I come here in April. It's always enjoyable. I won't have time today, but I'll make sure I get in tomorrow. Was it a good elf talk?
Yes.
Yeah? Yes. It's a very interesting debates with the elf stuff. That's right. Yeah. They're doing some very good work in Vienna on this with Barbara Seidelhofer. Very interesting work. And good with students as well, to show them all the differences and the varieties and how things are changing, what's important and what isn't important. I didn't go to it because when I have a talk, I always like to be quiet on my own, if it's possible, in the room where I'm going to do the talk. You know, because you get into the mood and everything, and then play the music that you like listening to, which is always good on Friday. Put your hands up if you're in love. Plenty of room here, Daniela.
Really?
Nowhere else.
You're gonna have
Round stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Mogu osjetiti? Ako hoćeš. Ajmo mi negdje drugdje, meni je ovdje prevruće, previše ljudi.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
You didn't get the chair, huh? Šta će vas? Tamo u čoše. Tako jedino za duševost,
Can I get that?
Yeah, sure.
Excuse me?
Somebody catch this. Right back. It's interesting. I bought this 2 days ago, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. made a little film about it yesterday, and I'll show you a bit. Thanks ever so much for coming, and this was on Wednesday. I always enjoy my first swim in the Adriatic in April when I come to Hooper. This is my 7th Hooper. The first time I was in this part of the world was 33 years ago, on my way down to Dubrovnik in 1979. I returned in 1993 and climbed the mountain at the back of here, Učka, and then I felt I needed a rest, so I got the bus to Rijeka, got myself on the Jadrolinja and went down to Dubrovnik in the summer of 1993. I didn't meet any other tourists there. I met a few unprofor people and a very glamorous journalist from the Washington Post took me out for a meal, which was very nice. The next time I was back, I was in Pula for your conference in 2002, I think. And I've been for the last 4 years. So I always enjoy coming to this part of the world, and I am really looking forward to our session today. As I say, this is... can we turn the lights down on the left? Can anybody see? It's always good to get students to do anything. Never do too much in the classroom. Always get your students to do anything, yeah, that you don't have to do. This is a photograph. I was here at the end of September, beginning of October, for 2 weeks, staying in Lovran, where I'm staying at the moment, and I took quite a lot of photographs. This was the one photograph that I took, which was in Lovran. And I'd just like you to look at that for a second. And can you notice anything that's a bit strange about that photograph? Anything that's a bit odd?
One great beer.
Excuse me, it's camera.
Is there anything about that, odd about that? Because there's more than one great beer. Yeah? Ožujsko is not the only great beer, maybe. I've never understood how you can have a beer which is named after a month of the year. If anybody knows any other beer which is named after a month of the year, I would love to know. It's a good idea. Apparently, and our technical assistant over here, Anis, who's there at the back, said it was because that, what did you say, Anis?
Because that's the best month for the beer production.
The best
Actually
month.
it is. In Germany you have this large beer.
The same thing?
The strong beer, right, so there is some logic to it.
Is there anything at all that's strange? Welcome to the country of... So with your students, you could maybe get them to look at, whether there's an article missing or not. That might be one thing you could do with this. Nora, come on in. You can sit at the back. You can get in. There are more than 1,000 cuties in Croatia. Of course there are more than 1,000 cuties in Croatia. So that might be something that's wrong with it. Anything else? Is there anything wrong with me?
Yeah, it's on the other way around. The reflection goes to the other side.
Yeah? It's a bit strange, isn't it? Yeah? And what about when you've got that there and that? Aren't they? These are different times of the day, aren't they? Yeah? Now these little things, when we're getting students to observe, to look very, very closely at things, is I think a skill that we sometimes neglect in our classes. Got lots of visual aids today. These two beers here. One Staropramet and the other Ožujsko. What's different about them?
The taste.
The taste. Which one do you prefer?
I drink plain.
Anybody else? Staropramen? Better? Yeah? Anything that they have in common? Cans, they're both in cans. Size is the same. Yeah? Shape is the same. Anything else they have in common? They haven't been drunk yet, yeah. So they'll be drunk at the end of this session. Yeah? So we can have this. Now, with 2 or 3 people around you, which countries are these beers brewed in? And what do they have in common? Just with the people around you, yeah? Just have a quick discussion.
Never mind, stop.
Na posljednju ponudu da hoćete recimo da donese stolice samo ispod projekcije. Jedino tamo ako hoćete.
Nećete probati? Svi?
A nema, ništa nije problem, nego da li hoćete tamo ispod projekcije. Pa evo odmah tu. Da, hvala. Evo ovako, prilike samo. Evo malo još nižu, malo još nižu.
Ne treba, ajde ne treba ćemo staviti. Ne treba, hvala.
Ok, Staropramen. Jelen? Borsodi? Ožuško? Kamenica? Bergenbier? Nikšićko? Which I used to drink all the time. When I lived in 1979 u Beogradu. Išao sam na institutu za strani jezik. Za 3 mjeseca. And Nikšićko was much better than Bip. Bip was a beer I couldn't get used to. But Nikšićko was the beer that we all loved at that time. That is what they have in common. They are all lager, very good. And they are all owned, yes Lindsay, they are all owned by the same company. Which is Starbev. Now, this is actually the brewer's market share in Eastern Europe from 2011. And you can see here that Starbev is actually quite small. Where you've got here, the biggest is Carlsberg, with 25%. It's quite nice with students, to get students to interpret charts, graphs, to transform a visual image into a linguistic thing. It makes it very, very different, but it's a nice little exercise. This is actually the different countries. Staropramen, can you shout out if you can see? Jelen, Ožuško, Bergenbier, Borsodi, Kamenica, Nikšićko. Yeah, very good. And you can see the market share. And actually, Ožuško has. And you also have this beer, Tomislav, yeah, which is the same brewery. Now, have a look here at the subject and the object. The subject is Molson Coors. The object is. Yes. Now, have a look down there and have a look at the verbs that you can see there, which connect the subject with the objects. Interesting, isn't it? There's lots of different verbs. It's quite good with students to get them to write down these different verbs which are used to describe this. When did this happen?
12. Last week. 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Just over 2 weeks ago. 3rd of April. Molson Coors Taps Easton. And where are Molson Coors from?
They're Denver based.
Denver based. Yeah, very good. Yeah. Now Molson Coors, Pete Coors, he's very friendly with George W. Bush. And this was at a beer technology conference. Can you find Pete Coors on there? Sixth, yeah? Sixth in what? The richest, not the richest men, but the richest. These people all have something in common. They're all politicians. Very good. So this is a list of politicians in the United States of America, and Pete Coors, who owns this brewery, is the 6th richest. Yeah? And they finance an organisation called Young America's Foundation. And this is from them. Are you tired of liberal ideas dominating your campus? Are you tired of liberal and Marxist professors indoctrinating your classmates? Do you want to advance conservatism? And this is the organisation that they work in. This is a very nice image, which I've often used. There's a guy called Ben Goldstein, who I heartily recommend, who has brought out a book called Working with Images. It's a Cambridge book, CUP, and of all the books that there are on working with images, this is my favourite of all the books of looking critically at images. It's full of interesting activities, and it's also got a CD-ROM with it, where you've got all of the images. And this is one of the images that is there. I quite like doctoring pictures, and I've actually put there our company, which has bought up all of this up there as well. Okay, you're 20 years old. Pretty good, eh? 20 years old, my wish. You managed 20 years old. It was great last night, and I really enjoyed seeing all of the pictures from the conferences. It's nice to look at biographies. It's nice to look at biographies of yourself, of your friends, of houses. A nice little project you can do with your students is to get them to find out about the house or the flats that they live in, how old it is, who lived there before, bring it to the class, and little field work that you can get your students to do on things that are familiar to them, but things that they might not know some things about. Now, my contribution to your anniversary, as I say, this is the 7th time that I've presented at a Hooper conference, is to look at critical thinking in the classroom. And what we've just seen with the beer and the breweries, I think would be a very interesting thing to do with your students. I shall write a blog post about this. I'm a very enthusiastic blogger, and in the next few days I shall write a blog post about this session, and I'll put all the links there so you can get all the links, and also to the videos that I'm going to show you. Because in the second half we're going to have a look at a video of a place that I went to on Tuesday afternoon in Zagreb, and also a video that I made in Devon. And they're about the same topic. And it's to do with getting students to think a little bit more about the world that we live in. So this is it's actually also 20 years ago that I first met Robert Phillipson. I was doing my MA at Lancaster in English language teaching, and Robert Phillipson came to our university to talk about issues in language teaching and about our role as English teachers, and whether in any way we had an imperialistic role or not. It certainly set lots of us thinking, and we decided to set up every Wednesday afternoon at Lancaster a critical issues in ELT, things which we didn't think were being covered on our course. And we looked at lots of things, from the English Language Gazette, the newspaper, to course books and textbooks. And I'm going to introduce you to a man who you may know, Andrew Littlejohn, who was doing his PhD on textbooks at the time. And he interviewed 5 textbook authors and was trying to find out about the kind of activities that there are in textbooks. But I'll come to Andrew in a minute. Now, the impetus for this talk really comes from, does anybody at all in this, I know one person who knows this, does anybody apart from Lindsay know who these images are linked to? Okay. Do you, any of you members of the big IATEFL? Do you ever get Voices? Have you seen Voices?
Yeah.
Has anyone got a copy of the new one?
Yes.
Yet? Really? Have you got it with you?
No, I have it in my room.
Have you? Yeah? Could you bring it down later? Because I haven't seen it yet. Because there's an article in it by me.
It's online.
But I haven't seen it yet. Yeah? It's online. I'll just have a look at it. Yeah? And actually, the person who has a regular column in this is called Sarah Hanau. And she has been based in Greece. She wrote her PhD about teachers in Serbia, and she now lives in Oxford. And do any of you know the image of the black cat? Apart from bringing luck to people. Does anybody know?
Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe, yes. Yeah. And anything connected to politics or anything? Do you know? The image actually comes from the industrial workers of the world, the black cat. And you may know an expression called wild cat strike. Have you ever heard that expression? A wild cat strike, which is a strike which is unannounced, which is intended to make a big impression. And that was actually from that. And Sarah has a blog called Critical Mass ELT, which she started 3 years ago. And she used these as her avatar, with the arched back of the cat. And Sarah wrote to me, and she asked me she wrote to me on Facebook in February, and she asked me this. And I said yes. And then I thought, when I was putting in the proposal to come to your conference, I thought it would actually be quite nice to do a talk based on this. So this is where this comes from. And Sarah asked me about things that I'd actually been doing in the past. I used to work in a language school in Brighton, and this was back in 1989, so this is 23 years ago. And I remember going into class the Monday with this. I bought 5 copies of this newspaper, took it in and discussed it with the students. It was the anniversary 5 days ago, of, does anybody know what this was about? There were 96 people who died, 96 Liverpool football fans who died in Sheffield. Hillsborough was the name of the ground, and it was Liverpool were playing Nottingham Forest, and the Sun on the Monday actually had this headline: some fans picked pockets of victims, some fans urinated on the brave cops, and some fans beat up PC giving kiss of life. And since then, there are thousands of people in Liverpool who never ever buy the Sun anymore. The Sun is the most popular newspaper in Britain, with the widest circulation. It's a very interesting story. I also said this is back in 1996, front page of a newspaper, the Daily Mirror. during Euro 96. It's always interesting when football is going on with newspapers and the kind of images that are used. And I have worked with this many times, getting students to look up. We had an interesting talk this morning. I actually really like it at your conferences that you have a Croatian academic to begin your conference. I've been coming a long time now, and I go to lots of conferences, and it's actually quite unusual at conferences to have somebody who is well respected in your profession to give the opening talk. And I particularly enjoyed it because it's a field that I've been working in for 20 years now on intercultural learning. And this kind of newspapers, getting students to taking in front pages of newspapers, now we can do this online very easily and look at the same story from different points of view. You can also do it with Croatian newspapers and take it and get students to look at where the photographs are, what the story is about, the difference in the headlines, get them to translate it into English. Many things that you can do with newspapers. This is also something that I mentioned to Sarah, which was the time in the 90s, and I took this photograph here of, and this was amazing. It's difficult to see here. Can you see what that says? Passenger lounge and customer lounge. And this was when the same place still had the two signs on. So it was called Passenger Lounge and Customer Lounge. Here, I took this in Bristol a few weeks ago, where it's now just the Customer Lounge. But we looked very closely at these two words, at the difference and the implications in whether you're a customer or whether you're a passenger. Because these things have a different relationship that you have if you're seen as somebody who you've made money out of or somebody who looked after as a passenger. Anyway, this is one of the things I sent to Sarah. This is also, I did a bus tour in 1990. I took two pop groups around Czechoslovakia and the German Democratic Republic. And I was shocked as anything. I used to live in Berlin in the 1980s. This is at the Dorotheen Friedhof near Friedrichstraße in Ost-Berlin. And I was shocked at seeing that. I was also shocked last week reading about this. Yesterday was Holocaust Day in Poland. I don't know in other countries when it was. It's a different time. So some people have it in January on the 27th, I think. But there's an issue going on at the moment with the Euro 2012 coming up. Les mentioned that the British Council has a good site connected to the football. Premier Skills. Premier Skills. Well, this is very interesting. They've been selling T-shirts which have been saying Jews not allowed into the stadium. And Łódź is a place where they're going to hold some of the European Championship games, which are taking place in June this year. So this is another thing. Another interesting thing, particularly with the Olympics coming up, that you might with your students look at the logos. I did some work with Luke Meddings in March, a few weeks ago, and we looked at the Olympic Games, and we looked at the logos going back to 1912, and the differences between the logos, and with your students to get them not only say which do they prefer, but also what are the differences? What can you see? Why is it that is the logo now? And can you see 2012, 2012, barely. There was a lot of opposition to this. A lot of people, felt it was very Nazi, like in the way that it is. But you can have very interesting discussion, and also how we've moved from that to that. It's also interesting to look at the Barcelona one in 19. I don't want to go through all of this now, but it's an activity I really recommend to do, to look at the different logos, and also to the next one in 2016. I've been reading lots about this logo, and fascinating. Do you know who painted this? Matisse. Yeah, Matisse painting. And also, can you see anything to do with Brazil in here? The colours, and what else? The dancing, yeah. And anything in Rio, connected to Rio? Yeah. Can anyone see the Sugar Loaf Mountain? In there? And all these interesting things that are in there. But just taking one or two photographs and then getting students to compare, discuss, I think is a very interesting critical activity. Now, we have Lindsay here. Lindsay, could you just for a minute, just tell people about the first book in the round and what you have written?
Okay. This is an e-book that I've started an authors collective. These are authors writing books, e-books, but they're writing themselves. There's no publisher. The author publishes themselves, but we're all selling it together. We're all doing books together. Little books, cheap books. This one is called 52, which is an activity book of 52 activities called 52 Subversive Activities for the ELT Classroom, where we try to do some of the things that Mark was talking about, look at issues and things that aren't in our materials, critical activities using critical images, critical ways of thinking about inside and outside of the classroom. The cover is is a redacted thing, which has erased all the stuff that would normally be in the books and the stuff that is not usually allowed in the books. Prejudice, gay, crime, bailout, sex, protest, ethics, things like that. So we try with sensitive ways of doing these things with students, which we have practiced ourselves. This is not a talk about that, but just that's the kind of thing that we were looking at.
Right, yeah. And the word that comes up in what Lindsay and Luke have written is this word fair. Fairly priced and a fair deal to authors. Because we've been putting so much on the internet over the last few years for free and doing lots and lots of work with it. And Luke and Lindsay thought, well, why not put some books up, only charge the price of a bottle of wine, an average bottle of wine, and actually be able to also make a little money out of it, as well as doing things which maybe some publishers are a bit unsure about. Yeah? Now, the person who I met at Lancaster when I was doing my degree, Andrew Littlejohn, does anybody know? Yeah? How do you know Andrew?
I listened to him on one of the conferences.
On one of the conferences, yeah?
Yes.
He wrote some books for Cambridge, for CUP. I have taught lots of courses in Hungary on intercultural learning and ELT and culture. And I've often used this article. I've highlighted the bits in red. Last summer, last Hooper conference, I met Vishnia Anic here at the Lungomare, and I did an interview with her, which you can find on YouTube. And Vishnia was introducing her workshop, which she was doing in this room a year ago. And she said it was to do with language games, and it was to do with getting the students to think a little bit, to be a little bit critical, not to be consumed by things that they don't think about. Really, to try to develop in a, what did you say, Vishnia, in a careful way? What were your words?
Yes, I said educate them covertly, not openly, in small doses, very, very gently, and so on, because otherwise they would,
right, yeah, covertly.
They can't being educated openly.
Yeah.
So you have to play games and do such stuff.
Very sensitive. 30 years ago, I taught in the German Democratic Republic, and we used to use these books which were just full of slavery and unions, and the Communist Party, and they were like just hit on the head with it. The students hated every minute of it, and there were issues. They wanted to get people to look at important, but the way it was done was just awful, really. It turned everybody off. So the word covertly that you've used, Vishnia, there, I think is an important word. I was, last week I was in the Lake District, and I went to William Wordsworth's school in Hawks Head, and I took this photograph of the school, and I spent about half an hour in the school, and I was looking at the way in which classrooms are arranged. When I came into here, this room, two hours ago, the first thing I did was to change all of the chairs. Instead of rows, to take them into where you can talk to each other a little bit. And getting the students, I also bought a slate there, just for £1.40, where you can draw. Looks a bit like an iPad, doesn't it? And it was a nice activity that you can do with your students is to just put up some pictures of classrooms and get them to talk about what kind of learning is going on in those classrooms. You can also ask your students to find the photographs themselves. This is, again, something which Andrew mentioned. And I feel quite strongly about this, that it often has a very bitty feel to it. And the idea of going back to project work, or working over a period of 2 or 3 weeks on something, might be more valuable. And Andrew also says here, normally we expect students to remember the learning content, but to forget the carrier content. This is an enormously wasted opportunity. If we make sure that all content is worth learning, that we use topics and things that are significant, we can enrich our teaching enormously and make language learning more effective. This was again using the students' intelligence. And Andrew's PhD was actually about finding the kind of tasks in textbooks which authors had written. And he found out from 5 authors that about 80% of the tasks were just students passively filling things in, not initiating anything. It was shocking, actually. You can read the PhD online. If you just put in Andrew Littlejohn, ELT, there are lots and lots of articles there, and you also find this article from there. One of the things that Andrew has is what kind of things can we discuss with the students as to whether, the task, how should we do it? In groups, in pairs, alone? How long should we spend on it? How shall we correct it? Who shall correct it? How much help do you want? And to do that with all of those different things. What other things should we do besides use the book? Number 4, what do you want to revise? How shall we test what you have learned? Now, all of these things engage students critically in their learning. Now, it wasn't easy to get students to be involved a long time ago when I was at school. It's not easy now. These are students that I've been working with over the last few months in Devon, teaching groups of teenagers from Slovakia, Czech Republic, Poland. And I've spent a long time thinking about how can I engage people who for hours and hours and hours are listening to stuff on their iPod, and what can we do about it? Now, 10 years ago, I taught in a secondary school in Hungary, and at the end of the year, I asked the students what they remember from the class.
So how old are the students?
15. Another serious and very important topic was the war. We read an article on the American-Iraq War. The article was very realistic, therefore extremely sad. I thought the journalist who wrote that is very brave for being so objective. We also talked about some festivals, which was interesting because we got to know more about other cultures. As usual, we had lots of lessons about music, which is one of the things I like the most because I like the kind of music we listen to, except Avril Lavigne. And I think the music gave the lessons a better and a more energetic atmosphere. I fell in love with one of the bands we listened to, Coldplay. All in all, I thought your lessons were as colourful as this assignment. Now, this is Demet Now. I wrote to Demet yesterday morning. And I wrote to a few people who I taught then on Facebook, because I was keen, and I wrote to them and I said, I'm doing a talk on critical things in ELT. What do you remember from our classes, and what was critical? So this is 10 years on. And this is, if you can see, some of the things that she wrote. I realised that some of the, thinking back, I realised that some of the seemingly non-educational, yet fun things we did ended up teaching me things about the world and how groups and individuals behave. Now, this is Luke and Lindsay. This is Luke and Lindsay in Glasgow a few weeks ago. And Luke Meddings wrote an article for The Guardian 6 years ago called Embrace the Parsnip. It's a great article. Just put in Luke Meddings, Embrace the Parsnip, you'll find it. But the kind of things that in mainstream course books publishers are a bit unsure about. P for politics, A for, you tell them, Lindsay. A for
Alcohol.
R for
Religion.
S for
Sex.
N for
Narcotics.
I for
Isms. Communism, atheism, socialism, any isms.
and P for
Pork.
pork.
Well, for Muslim markets.
Muslim. Now, back again to, because she mentioned about how some of those topics were actually very memorable and how they learnt a lot through them. And in the English class, you know, it's interesting that your classes provided a safe space. We had real debates and so many questions without feeling the need to mask our opinions. Even though as teenagers we weren't always comfortable with having opinions in front of our classmates. Normally we would gauge what the hive mind thinks about a topic and form opinions based on that. However, your classes provided a safe space. Yeah? More opportunities to speak. There's another guy called Kares, yeah? And he says, I wrote to him yesterday as well. I see it as a competitive advantage of mine that I'm taking the initiative, and I know it derives at least partially from your classes. Someone else, Eva, we usually went off at a tangent to real life related topics and that you were interested in our opinions. Yeah? Now Rose Senior, this won the Ben Warren Prize 7 years ago now, and the experience of language teaching. And Rose interviewed lots of teachers about what good teaching was about. And these are some of the things that she came up with. Having the courage to depart from lesson plans, going off on a tangent. Another student, Esther, about the newspapers. The core of your idea was to think about the news information we read and not accept what we read right away. Again, critical things about using newspapers. This was a student, we did Katy Perry's song, Baby You're a Firework, and spent a lot of time looking at the video with two men kissing each other about bullying, and there's a girl in the video who's a little bit fat, who doesn't feel good about herself, and then she jumps into the swimming pool. And we had very interesting discussions looking at Katy Perry's video. Here's another guy, Tomasz. In every school. So I went interactive. There's another guy, Eric. Well, I like to make the classes that they were so interactive. So all of these things, yeah, were. Now, responding to what's going on in the world and take it into the classroom. There was a disaster in South Wales, Aberfan, in 1966, and there were 116 young children and 28 adults who died. It was at a coal mine, but all of the rubbish from the coal was put in a slag heap, and it all came down with the rain. And when this happened, 2 years ago, I was doing a talk at IATEFL Hungary, and 4 days before this happened. I don't know if you remember. It was an aluminium company, and the banks of this artificial lake burst and polluted all the rivers. Yeah?
Got killed by 10 million pounds of sludge from New York.
And we looked at this at the conference. And this was where it happened. And it covered all of the villages. And 10 people died. And this was something that people said 6 years ago. And we looked at this, which was interesting. In Hungarian, natural természeti katasztrófa, Naturkatastrophe in German, catastrophe in English. And we looked at what was a natural disaster. And I remember Abba Fan, at the age of 9, watching that and thinking that it was a natural disaster. And I hadn't actually realised that it was due to negligence and people not being careful. And then with the students that were 15 years old, we then discussed, well, whose fault was this, that this happened? And this is again from the round. Yeah? And again, the title of my talk here, Teaching Critically in Critical Times, Breaking Down the Walls of the Classroom and Opening Students' Eyes to the World Around them. And this is what Luke and Lindsay wrote about the round. We both felt that most of what was going on in language classrooms was happening in a comfortable little bubble, divorced from reality. Now, this is a little book. I couldn't believe it. It's a book that I really enjoyed. It's 20 years old. It's called Process and Experience in the Language Classroom. It's about project work. It's by Michael Laguka and Howard Thomas. I'd lost my copy. We wrote for it to get it back on Amazon. Just before Christmas. Grenville at the back there. Grenville, the executive director of Sol, who's there filming this for us. I got it back and I found out it had my initials in it. M.A. It was my book that I got back from ordering it on Amazon. I could not believe it. So the M.A. So where it had been in the meantime, I don't know. But it's a great book, and it's all about project work and field work and taking your students out of the classroom. Not in Britain, yeah, but where you are in this. What? That's a sign. A sign. It must be something. It was the most wonderful story and experience that I had. I could not believe it. I remember Grenville. I was so excited when the book arrived and opened it, tore it open. But a lot of
so you always come back to it?
Yeah, I always come back.
It doesn't belong to
It doesn't belong to me, so it's come back. So it's wonderful. And it was this series edited by Christopher Candling, who was responsible for setting up the Lancaster MA with Mike Breen back in 1980. Now, we look at the word fair. And you might do this with students. Yeah? We'll throw this around. Can somebody catch it? Can you give us an expression with fair? Anything. Collocation with fair, a sentence with fair, and then throw it to somebody else and get them to say something.
Fairy Queen.
Fairy Queen.
Was a fair game.
A fair game. Throw it to somebody else. We do this, don't we, with young children in classes, sometimes with older.
A fair deal.
A fair deal, very good.
Someone over here, wait.
Fairy truth. What's it made of? No? No. It's made of the leaves of this. Now, a month ago, when I was with Luke in Austria, we did an activity with teachers. We had 5 posters on the floor, got a banana on each poster, and then got the teachers to come up with interesting ideas and activities with what you might do with a banana. We had some fantastic things, yeah? From language slipping on a banana skin, yeah? To fair trade with bananas, to recipes with bananas. There was a whole mixture of interesting things that people came up with. Now, on my way down to, could we turn the lights off completely? On my way down to Opatia, I stopped off here. I wrote to these people on Facebook. So after finding Croatia's first and only fair trade shop and cafe online, I got off the train at Zagreb on the way to London and